Winter 1965. The harbor of New York City. A French naval vessel cuts through the icy water, its hull low in the waves. But this ship is not carrying soldiers. It is carrying something far more dangerous, gold. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of it. We are told that empires fall because of war, because of invasion, because generals make mistakes on battlefields. That is the story we are taught. But here is the truth. Empires do not fall because of bullets. They fall because of ledgers. They fall because the balance sheet does not balance. And in 1965, Charles de Gaulle was about to prove that the American empire was built on a promise it could not keep. This was not a robbery. This was a bank run. And the bank was the United States of America. Let us go back. Let us go to the moment when America became the center of the financial universe. It is 1944. The war is still raging, but the Allies know they are winning. They gather at a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The smell of cigar smoke fills the room. Maps are spread across tables. And in that room a system is born, the Bretton Woods system. It is elegant. It is simple. Every currency on earth will be pegged to the U.S. dollar, and the dollar will be pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. The promise is clear. If you hold a dollar, you hold a claim on gold. Any central bank can walk into the U.S. Treasury and trade paper for metal. It is a guarantee. It is a contract written in gold. For 20 years the system works. Europe rebuilds from rubble. Japan rises from atomic ash. Trade flows like a river across the oceans. The dollar is trusted. The dollar is king. American industry hums. American banks finance the world. And buried deep in the vaults of Fort Knox, 20,000 tons of gold sit in silence. The promise is backed by metal. The promise is real. But beneath the surface, the foundation is rotting. Here is the problem. As the world economy grows, it needs more dollars. To meet that demand, the United States prints more currency. At first, this is fine. The gold is there. The ratio holds. But then the costs begin to pile up. The Cold War is expensive. Military bases in Germany, Japan, Korea, Turkey. They all cost money. Aid programs to developing nations cost money. And then comes Vietnam. The war in the jungles of Southeast Asia is a furnace that burns cash. Every helicopter, every bomb, every soldier cost dollars. And at home, President Lyndon Johnson launches the Great Society. Welfare programs, housing programs, health care. The printing presses are running hot. The dollars are flowing out of Washington like water from a broken dam. And the gold is not growing. You cannot print gold. You can only dig it from the ground. And America is not digging fast enough. By 1960, the math is starting to break. By 1965, it is a crisis. The United States has printed far more dollars than it has gold to cover. The account is overdrawn. The promise is a lie. Enter Charles de Gaulle. He is a giant, a war hero. The man who liberated France from the Nazis. He is proud, stubborn, and deeply suspicious of the Anglo-Saxon powers. He hates the idea that France must rely on America for security or for money. He sees the dollar system as a trap, a gilded cage. And his economic advisors are showing him the numbers. They show him the balance of payments deficit. They show him how American corporations are buying French companies with printed paper. IBM buys French computer firms. Ford buys French car makers. They are trading ink for steel. They are trading air for assets. De Gaulle is outraged. He calls it the Exorbitant Privilege. He says America has a superpower that no other nation possesses. If France wants to buy oil, it must earn dollars by selling wine or cheese. It must work for its money. But if America wants to buy something, it just prints more green paper. It is a free lunch. It is theft. And de Gaulle decides he will not tolerate it any longer. On February 4th, 1965, he calls a press conference at the Élysée Palace. The room is packed. Chandeliers hang from the ceiling. De Gaulle wears his military uniform. He speaks slowly, deliberately. He delivers a lecture on the history of money. He says gold is the only true currency. Gold has no nationality. Gold is eternal. Gold is unalterable. And then he makes his move. He announces that France will no longer accept promises from the United States. France will exercise its right under Bretton Woods. France will take its reserves of U.S. dollars and send them back to the Treasury. And in exchange, France demands the gold. The announcement is a shockwave. It is a declaration of financial war. De Gaulle is calling America's bluff. He is shouting fire in a crowded theater, and he knows exactly what he is doing. If other nations follow France, the U.S. gold supply will vanish in days. In Washington, President Johnson is furious. He calls de Gaulle an ungrateful old man. He sends diplomats to Paris. They plead. They argue that this will destabilize the West. They say it will help the Soviets. They appeal to friendship, to history, to loyalty. But de Gaulle does not care about sentiment. He cares about the ledger, and the ledger does not lie. The United States owes more than it can pay. Sovereignty is solvency, and America is insolvent. The logistics begin. This is not a digital transfer. This is 1965. The gold must physically move. The Bank of France gathers pallets of dollar bills. They notify the Federal Reserve. The U.S. Treasury has no choice. If they refuse, the dollar collapses immediately, so they open the vaults. Fort Knox, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. They load bars of gold onto trucks. Each bar weighs 400 ounces, pure 24-karat gold. They drive the bars to the docks. They load them onto ships, French naval vessels. The gold crosses the Atlantic. It arrives in French ports. It is driven to Paris. It is placed in the vaults of the Banque de France. De Gaulle wants to touch it. He wants to see it. He does not trust the Americans to hold it for him. The first shipments arrive. The American media turns on France. They call the French ungrateful. They boycott French wine. They pour champagne into the gutters. But de Gaulle does not care. He cares about the balance sheet. And the balance sheet is shifting. The gold is leaving America. In 1945, the U.S. held 20,000 tons of gold. By 1965, that number has dropped. And now, with France taking chunks every month, the bleeding accelerates. Other nations are watching. Germany holds massive dollar reserves. Japan holds massive dollar reserves. Spain, Italy, Belgium. They are loyal allies. They rely on American military protection. They are afraid to anger Washington. But they are also afraid of being the last one holding the bag. If France takes all the gold, what will be left for them? A quiet run begins. Central banks start covertly exchanging dollars for gold. They try not to make a scene, but they are protecting themselves. The London gold pool, a mechanism to suppress the price of gold, becomes unbearable. The market wants gold to rise. But the U.S. is selling gold to keep it at $35. They are bleeding reserves to maintain a fantasy. De Gaulle's attack is not just economic. It is geopolitical. He wants to break American hegemony over Europe. He wants Europe to be independent. A third pole between the U.S. and the USSR. He sees the dollar as the chain that binds Europe to American foreign policy. By breaking the dollar, he hopes to free Europe. He is particularly critical of Vietnam. He believes the war is unjust and doomed. He argues that Europe is indirectly paying for the bombing of Vietnamese villages, because the U.S. prints money to pay for the bombs, and Europe absorbs the inflation by holding the dollars. By demanding gold, he is defunding the American war machine. The tension mounts through the late 60s. The U.S. government tries everything to stop the bleeding. They impose capital controls. American citizens cannot invest abroad. They discourage tourism to keep dollars at home. They pressure Germany. The German chancellor receives a letter from the U.S. It is a threat. If Germany converts its dollars, America will withdraw its troops. It is a protection racket. We will defend you from the Soviets, but you must hold our depreciating currency. Germany folds. France does not. By 1968, the situation is critical. The United States has lost more than half of its gold reserves since World War II. The vaults are emptying. The French have repatriated tons of gold. The American public is nervous. There is talk of a dollar crisis. The price of imports is rising. Inflation is ticking up. De Gaulle had warned them, and now it is arriving in American cities. The first part of de Gaulle's plan has worked. He exposed the weakness. He proved the emperor has no clothes. He moved the physical wealth of the West from New York to Paris, but he also unleashed forces he cannot control. He started a fire, and the fire is spreading. The Bretton Woods system is cracking. The markets smell blood. Speculators are gathering. And in the White House, a new president is watching. Richard Nixon takes office. Nixon is not an economist. He is a politician. He cares about power. He cares about winning elections. He looks at the gold drain with cold eyes. He knows the game is up. The United States cannot keep paying gold forever. He has to make a choice. Save the dollar's reputation, or save the American economy. And Nixon is not afraid to flip the table. By the summer of 1971, the financial war has reached a boiling point. The gold has bled out. De Gaulle is dead now. He died the previous year. But his successors continue the policy. And then the British make their move. The British government approaches the U.S. Treasury quietly. They want to convert $3 billion of reserves into gold. $3 billion. It is a third of the remaining U.S. gold stock. If the United States pays the British, the vault is empty. The dollar is finished. Nixon gathers his advisors at Camp David. It is a secret meeting. The world does not know. His Treasury Secretary is John Connally, a tough Texan. They debate the options. Traditional economists say they must save the gold standard. They say cutting the link to gold will destroy credibility. They warn of chaos. But Connally is blunt. He says the dollar is our currency, but your problem. He argues for the nuclear option. Close the gold window. Stop the shipments. Tell the world to get lost. On Sunday evening, August 15th, 1971, Richard Nixon interrupts the television show Bonanza. He addresses the nation. He talks about defending the dollar against speculators. He blames faceless financial forces, and then he drops the bomb. He suspends the convertibility of the dollar into gold. He says it is temporary. It is a lie. The gold window never opens again. The Nixon shock. It is an earthquake. In Paris, the French government is stunned. De Gaulle had won the argument, but he lost the war. France bet that gold was the ultimate money, that the U.S. would be forced to discipline itself. Instead, the U.S. simply changed the rules. They declared that gold no longer mattered. The dollar was money because the United States said so. The currency markets shut down. When they reopen, the dollar plummets. It falls against the franc, the mark, the yen. American goods become cheaper. Foreign goods become expensive. It is a massive devaluation. It hurts Europe. It helps American manufacturers. It is exactly what Nixon wanted. For the French sitting on piles of gold in Paris, it is bittersweet. Yes, they have their gold. And yes, the price of gold skyrockets. In the years after Nixon, gold goes from $35 an ounce to over $800. The French treasury makes a fortune on paper. De Gaulle's decision looks like genius. He traded depreciating paper for an asset that exploded in value. But the deeper goal failed. De Gaulle wanted to force the United States to be responsible. He wanted to return the world to honest money, where nations could not print their way out of debt. Instead, his attack forced the U.S. to sever the last link to reality. The world moved from a gold standard to a fiat standard. In this new world, the United States does not need gold. It can print as many dollars as it wants, and the world has no choice but to accept them, because there is no alternative. The dollar remains the reserve currency, not because it is backed by gold, but because it is backed by the U.S. military and the U.S. economy. The consequences are still with us. The inflation of the 1970s is a direct result of this decoupling. Without the discipline of gold, governments print money to solve every political problem. The era of stable prices is over. The era of constant inflation begins. For France, the Gold War is the last great act of defiance by a European power. The last time a Western ally dares to look Washington in the eye and say no. The ships that carried the gold across the Atlantic are the final convoy of an older world. A world where money was physical, where debts had to be paid, where a promise written on paper was expected to be honored. The legacy is profound. It taught the world that the United States would always act in its own self-interest, even if it meant breaking treaties. It taught developing nations that holding dollar reserves was a risk. The rules could change overnight, and it validated the cynicism of Charles de Gaulle, who always believed that nations have no friends, only interests. In the end, the Gold War was a battle between two philosophies. The philosophy of gold, represented by France, which valued stability, history, tangible assets, and the philosophy of the dollar, represented by the United States, which valued flexibility, growth, and the power of the state to manage the economy. The United States won the geopolitical battle. The dollar remained king. But France won the moral argument. The instability, the debt crises, the inflation that have plagued the global economy since 1971 are the direct result of ignoring de Gaulle's warning. Today, the gold that France repatriated still sits in the deep vaults of the Banque de France in Paris. It is one of the largest gold reserves in the world. It sits there as a silent monument, a monument to the time when France forced the United States to pay its debts, It is a reminder of the brief moment when a French president sent his navy to New York, not to conquer territory, but to capture the truth. The ships have long since been scrapped. The politicians are dead, but the gold remains. Eternal, unalterable, indifferent to the paper promises of empires. The gold war is over, but the question it asked remains unanswered. What is money really? Is it a promise from a government? Or is it a cold, hard piece of metal that owes nothing to anyone? Charles de Gaulle made his choice, and looking at the mountain of debt the world sits on today, it is hard to say he was wrong. History is not decided by generals or politicians. It is decided by accountants, debt, and resources. The ledger always wins, and in 1965, Charles de Gaulle read the ledger. He saw the lie, and he made America pay. Subscribe now to stay ahead of the curve, because when the history books are written, you will want to be among the few who saw it coming. Thanks for watching.